Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Service Examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Daily edition dated 3rd November 2022. The important topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and a timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So before starting the discussion, let us see the question for the weekly mains answer writing practice. The question is from the Science and Text section. The question says, despite the successful efforts at the field trials of genetically modified edible crops, there have been protests against their consumption. You have to examine the use and consumption of genetically modified crops based on the existing examples. This is a long question. That means you have to answer this particular question within the word limit of 250 words. So attempt this particular question on our ELEARN platform and get it evaluated by our expert evaluation team. So first of all, a very happy International Day for Biosphere Reserve. Yes, this year onwards, November 3 will be celebrated as the International Day for Biosphere Reserves. And this is the very context of the news article which we are going to discuss. This particular news article has appeared at page number 6 in the article sections of today's The Hindu Daily edition. As far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic is relevant for prelims as well as mains point of view. Because under this topic, what we are going to learn is the concept of biosphere, about the factual details related to World Network for Biosphere Reserves and all those things. And that is why in prelims, in the environment and ecology section, this topic becomes important. And similarly, when it comes to mains, it is important in General Studies Mains Paper 3. So let us begin our discussion in detail. First of all, today's article mentions about the World Network for Biosphere Reserve. Now what is this? So there are certain factual informations related to this. It was formed in 1971 and basically, as the name suggests, it is the network of sites. And these network of sites are nothing but the biosphere reserves. What are biosphere reserves? They are the protected areas. The biosphere reserves are designated because they have a huge ecological diversity and also they have a very high significance when it comes to the ecological restoration as well as biodiversity conservation. So there are three key components which are focused by this World Network for Biosphere Reserve for the overall sustainable development. The first component is the participatory dialogue. This means that people's participation is relatively important when it comes to the sustainable development. The people living in those biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, or areas which are ecologically fragile are the important stakeholders of those very regions. They have certain rights. Their dependence is also based on the resources of those particular areas, and that is why whenever we have to plan for the conservation or sustainable development, we must focus towards participatory approach. Second is the knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing is basically the sharing of best practices, policies, either technological, economic, social, whatever the domain is. But this knowledge, these best practices must be shared among all the stakeholders. For example, if a country A is having certain practice, it is following that practice and it is getting better results when it comes to the biodiversity conservation, it must be shared with the other country also so that this country can also replicate its model in order to conserve its biodiversity. So this knowledge sharing is not only at the international levels, it is subnational also, it is regional also. The basic aim is that the knowledge or the practices must be shared among the various stakeholders. The third important component is the poverty reduction. Now this is very important. Always remember whenever it comes to your prelims examination or whenever you have to give your ideas in the mains answer, this poverty reduction is one of the most important component when it comes to the sustainable development, ecological restoration and biodiversity conservation. This shows the relative importance of the human part when it comes to the natural conservation. So these are the three components when it comes to the sustainable development under World Network for Biosphere Reserves. This network of biosphere reserves focuses on north-south coordination, south-south coordination, as well as south-north coordination. This article also mentions about the MAB program, which is very closely related to the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, because this network has been set up under this MAB program. So we will discuss that what exactly is the MAB program. For this, first we need to understand that what are biosphere reserves. So biosphere reserves are basically the protected areas which are designated in order to maintain the ecology as well as biodiversity. The overall aim to designate certain areas as biosphere reserve is to ensure sustainable development of that particular region. So every country has its own biosphere reserves. For example, in India also, there are a lot of biosphere reserves. Similarly, there are biosphere reserves in other countries as well. So one is the National Biosphere Reserves. These are designated by the respective country. Out of all these biosphere reserves, the respective country then nominate few biosphere reserves out of these biosphere reserves to the UNESCO. So these biosphere reserves are nominated by the national government, and if it fits the suitable criteria, then the UNESCO's Director General designate those biosphere reserves as the biosphere reserves under MAB program. Now this MAB program is of UNESCO. For example, in India there are 18 biosphere reserves, and out of all those biosphere reserves, 12 biosphere reserves are the part of MAB program of UNESCO. So this MAB stands for Man and Biosphere Reserve Program. It is basically an intergovernmental scientific program which is based on interlinking the people as well as nature. That means it has both the components. First is the natural component, other is the social component. So this MAB program focuses on natural sciences as well as social sciences, and this is the core principle of conservation. We are continuously discussing it. Whenever you have to plan for sustainable development in a forest area, in national park, in biosphere reserve, in all these things, you not only have to see for the natural component. Obviously wildlife, trees, plants, all those species are important, but in addition to this, you must also focus on the social component about the people, tribes, society which are living in that particular area. And that is why the development with this particular program aims is the sustainable development focusing on economic, socio-cultural as well as environmental aspects. All these components are important. This MAB program then supports various national governments which are the part of this particular program. They provide knowledge, they provide funds if required, they provide their expertise, and all these things guide the policy makers of the national governments. Further, when it comes to the governing structure of this MAB program, we have one MAB Council. In this MAB Council, there are 34 member states, and these members are elected by the United Nations General Conference. Further, this council elects one chairperson and 5 vice chairpersons from different geopolitical regions of UNESCO. And collectively, these 6 members are known as MAB Bureau. So one, we have MAB Council, and second, we also have MAB Bureau. So these are the key factual details related to the MAB program. That is the Man and Biosphere Reserve program. We have already learned that what is biosphere. Now, after learning about the structure of this MAB program, we will learn about the structure of the Biosphere Reserve. So every Biosphere Reserve is divided into 3 main parts. These 3 parts are known as zones. So this is the zonation of Biosphere Reserves. The innermost area, this one is known as the core area. Then this part, the adjacent area to the core area, is known as buffer zone. And after buffer zone comes the transitional area. As per the domestic laws, as well as international policies, there are certain prohibitions on different types of human activities in these different zones. For example, this particular core area is a strictly protected area. So, the national parks which you people regularly hear about, all these national parks form the part of core area. In these national parks, there is absolute prohibition on any type of human activity. Yes, for certain research purposes, it can be open to the researchers. Otherwise, all the human activities are prohibited. Then comes the buffer zone. So, in this particular region, only those activities are allowed which are compatible with the sound ecological practices. For example, scientific research, monitoring, training, education, limited recreation is also allowed in the buffer zones, tourism, as well as fishing and grazing. These activities are important as far as the buffer zones are concerned. Then comes the transitional area. So obviously the degree of relaxation of various human activities in the transitional area will be least compared to the buffer zone as well as the core area. So that is why in this transition zone, the communities are allowed to reside. There are tribal areas in these transition zones, and therefore it is the area where communities foster the socio-culturally and ecologically sustainable economic and human activities. So these are three zones in the biosphere reserve: the core area, the buffer zone, as well as the transitional area. In this line, we should now also look at which are those biosphere reserves of India which are the part of MAB program. So in total, there are 12 biosphere reserves of India which are the part of MAB. The list is there in front of your screen. So we will be going through the names of these biosphere reserves and the states where these are located. First is the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. It is expanded across 3 states: Tamil Nadu, Kerala, as well as Karnataka. Second is the Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve. So obviously the name is suggesting the location also. It is within the boundaries of Tamil Nadu. Third is Sundarbans Biosphere Reserve in West Bengal. Fourth is Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve in Uttarakhand. Now many students confuse this with Himachal Pradesh. So be very clear that Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve is in Uttarakhand. Next comes the Nokrek Biosphere Reserve in the state of Meghalaya. Then again is very famous one, the Panchmadi Biosphere Reserve in state of MP. Simlipal Biosphere Reserve, Odisha. The name of this particular biosphere reserve is based on the name of the trees found in this particular area. Then we have Great Nicobar Biosphere Reserve in Andaman and Nicobar. Then we have Achanakmar Amarkantak Biosphere Reserve. Obviously the name is again suggesting the location of Amarkantak Plateau. This biosphere reserve is spreaded to the states of Chhattisgarh as well as Madhya Pradesh. Agasthamalai Biosphere Reserve, again an important one, spreaded in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve in Sikkim. And the latest addition to this list is Panna Biosphere Reserve in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So in this session we have discussed about the key facts related to the World Network for Biosphere Reserves. We have discussed it because now onwards November 3 will be celebrated as International Day for Biosphere Reserve. We discussed about the 3 components of the participatory dialogue: knowledge sharing and poverty reduction as the key components of sustainable development. Then we looked at certain key details about the MAB program, its structure which comprised of MAB Council as well as MAB Bureau. In line with this, we also discussed the concept of Biosphere Reserve, which are having 3 zones, that is core area, buffer area as well as transitional area. And in the last, we came across those biosphere reserves of India which are in total 12 and are part of MAB program. This article has appeared at page number 1 in today's The Hindu Daily edition. The context of this very news item is the recent study which has suggested the decrease in sizes of the horns of rhinos. So as far as the context is concerned, it is not very important, but because of this context, this topic is very important in current affairs. So in this regard, we will be discussing certain key elements, key facts related to this important species, because in prelims examination, the species related questions are often asked related to their conservation level, their IUCN status, their distribution, their natural habitat, etc. So, in the regard of these rhinoceros also, we are going to discuss these very informations. First of all, if you closely look at this global distribution of rhinoceros species, you will see that there are around 5 to 6 species of rhinos which are distributed in different regions of the world. For example, if we have to talk about India, in India we all know that we have greater one-horned rhinoceros. In Africa, we have the presence of black rhinos, as well as in certain patches, we also have the presence of southern white rhinos. Then comes the Southeast Asian region, whereby the Sumatran rhino and Java rhinos are there. So now we will look at the IUCN conservation level of these species. So all these 5 species are placed in different categories when it comes to the red list of IUCN. For example, the IUCN status of Indian or great one-horned rhino is vulnerable. Further, if we talk about the Wildlife Protection Act, then this species is listed under Schedule 1. Sumatran rhino is placed in the category of critically endangered species. Similarly, Javan rhino is also critically endangered, and black rhino is also critically endangered. But when it comes to the white rhino, these species are nearly threatened. That means the severity of their decreasing population is far lesser compared to the other 4 species. Now, in the Indian context, we also must understand that what are the essential conditions for the favorable habitat for the greater one-horned rhino. So when it comes to the natural habitat, the grasslands and the wetlands are the most favorable area for these species. That is why they are located in the foothills of Himalayas, Ganga and Brahmaputra valleys. In certain patches, they are also present in Indo-Nepal Terai region, northern parts of West Bengal as well as Assam. However, formerly they had an extensive distribution over the entire plains of Brahmaputra as well as Ganga. So these were the certain key facts related to various species of rhinos and more precisely for the Indian rhinos. This topic has appeared at text and the context page. This topic is particularly relevant from the polity section. The context of this very topic is the recent disqualification of the member of the Uttar Pradesh legislature. Actually, the issue is that there were 2 members, one from the ruling BJP party and other from the Samajwadi party. And in this regard, the state assembly seat of the Rampur was declared vacant by the UP Assembly Secretariat after conviction of leader Azam Khan. However, the seat of BJP ML Vikram Saini has not been declared vacant despite being convicted for 2 years in Muzaffarnagar riot case 2013. So the question arises that why is there a difference that in one case the seat has been declared vacant and in the other case the seat is not declared vacant? For this to understand, we must understand all the provisions related to the disqualification of any member which is there in the RPA Act. RPA Act is the Representations of People Act 1951. So in today's session, when we will learn certain things, we will conclude that there is a very complex procedure. The provisions which are there in the law are so complex that it becomes virtually very difficult to understand these things. And in this very theme, in 2020, the UPSC asked the question. Carefully read this question. It said that there is a need for simplification of the procedure for disqualification of the persons found guilty of the corrupt practices under Representations of People Act. So the core theme is need for simplification in the context of disqualification under Representations of People Act 1951. So obviously, for this to answer, you must know that what are various grounds under RPA Act. And this is what we are going to learn in today's session. So we will move gradually. First, we need to understand there are 2 things. One is the conviction and other is the sentencing. So the conviction is when the certain charges are proved against a person and that person is declared as the culprit. So this is the conviction, that is on the basis of the evidence which are there with the authorities. Those evidence are taken care of by the courts, they are interpreted and the court declare that yes, this person has committed some crime. So this declaration is the conviction. After the conviction, when the quantum of the punishment is decided by the court, this is known as sentencing. So conviction is just the proven fact. The sentencing is the quantum of the punishment. So these two things should be clear to all of you, right? Conviction and sentencing. Now this sentencing, the quantum of the punishment can be of various types. For example, 2 years of jail term, 10 years of jail term, life imprisonment, etc. It can vary. And similarly, sentencing can also be in a form of fine. Now we will discuss this section 8 of Representations of People Act. First of all, it makes two differences with regard to sentencing. It says that there are two major broad classifications of sentences. One is, as we discussed, fine, and other is the imprisonment. If after the conviction, the sentence has been given by court in terms of only the fine, then the disqualification will be for a period of 6 years from the date of such conviction. For example, let's say today is 3rd November. So let's say today the person is convicted. Then on 10th November, this person is sentenced for only the fine. Then the period for disqualification for him or her will be for 6 years from the date of conviction, which means that up to 3rd November 2028. Is it clear? Now comes the imprisonment. If this sentence is in terms of imprisonment, then the disqualification will be from the date of conviction and shall continue for a further period of 6 years since his release. That means now the disqualification will be the period of conviction 6 years after the release. So let's say if the sentence is awarded for 3 years, then for these 3 years the member is disqualified, and then in addition to this, that once the member is released, then after 6 years again he is disqualified. So total comes out to be 9 years. Is it okay? Sentences are of two types. One is only fine, other is imprisonment. If it is for fine, then the disqualification will be simply from the date of conviction for 6 years. If it is imprisonment, then the disqualification will start from the date of conviction itself, but it will continue up to 6 years from the release after that sentencing period. So this is basically the first category. Here it is written in detail, which we have discussed till now. So the categories of the offenses under this type of disqualification, that is on the basis of conviction, are: first, promoting enmity between different groups on the grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, and doing the acts which are prejudicial to maintenance of harmony. Second, making the statements or promoting the enmity, hatred, or ill will between the classes, or offense related to such statements in any place of worship or the religious ceremonies and performance of religious worship. Next, offense of bribery. Next, offense of undue influence or personation at an election. And last, the offenses related to rape and cruelty to women by husband and later's relatives. Further, there are some special laws also, for example, of Protection of Civil Rights Act, Customs Act, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. If there is a breach of any of these acts, then also the disqualification comes under this very category. Similarly, the laws of prevention of sati, corruption, terrorism, insult to national flag and national anthem, etc. are also the part of this category. Now we'll discuss about the second category. This second category states that the disqualification will not be just on the basis of mere conviction. So it says that a mere conviction will not entail the disqualification, and therefore a sentence of at least 2 years imprisonment is needed for the crimes which are outside this list. If any person has violated the law specific to those crimes which are not there in this list, then that person will not be disqualified just on the basis of conviction, but he will be disqualified if the sentence is awarded to him for at least 2 years. That is why in beginning we started that there are two things. One is the conviction and second is the sentencing. Disqualification can be there on the basis of conviction also. Disqualification can be there on the basis of sentence also. So there are exclusive list of certain crimes according to which the disqualification is made. And in this line, section 8.4 of the Representations of People Act 1951 is very important. Though this section was struck down in Lily Thomas versus Union of India case, this is very famous case. So according to the erstwhile section 8.4 of the RPA, what did it say? It says that MPs or MLAs could avoid the immediate disqualification if an appeal was filed within 3 months. For example, let's say there is a person A who is convicted for some crime, and immediately after this conviction, if he files an appeal before the court within the 3-month period, then he will not be liable for immediate disqualification. So that means if I am a member and I am convicted for some offense, so I will not be disqualified because now I have a legal loophole. I will immediately file an appeal in front of High Court or Supreme Court, and therefore I will not be immediately disqualified. But this section was declared unconstitutional by Supreme Court in Lily Thomas case. So till now I hope these things are clear. The difference between conviction, sentencing, various types of disqualifications under these two situations, etc. Now comes the removal of disqualification. Now the Supreme Court has the power to put a stay on conviction as well as sentences, right? Stay means simply putting an hold. So that means, let's say if a person is again convicted and then he has also been sentenced, and let's say the Supreme Court has put a stay on sentence. So that means that person is still convicted, he is proven guilty, but he is not sentenced to any particular punishment. So the Supreme Court can put a stay on sentence also. Similarly, the Supreme Court can also put a stay on conviction also. If the court feels that certain evidences have been manipulated or under different situations, it feels that the investigation was not proper or something like that, then the court can put a stay on conviction also. If the court stays on the conviction, now yourself think, then it means that the person is not proven guilty. So obviously he will not be sentenced, right? So the Supreme Court has the power to stay not only the sentence but also the conviction of a person. However, Supreme Court has made it clear that such stays should be very rare and for special reasons. So this was about section 8 of the RPA. Section 11 of the RPA 1951 provides the Election Commission the power to remove or reduce the period of disqualification. This is very important. Again, I am repeating it. Section 11 of RPA 1951 provides Election Commission also the power to remove or reduce the period of disqualification for any member. Now let us see this particular chart. So obviously it is true for High Court as well as Supreme Court order. We have just discussed that the court can put a stay on conviction as well as on the sentencing. So let's say if the court has stayed the sentence only. So that means the sentence has been stayed but conviction has not been stayed. This means that conviction will still continue. And this in turn means that the disqualification which was based on the conviction will also continue. On the other hand, if the court has stayed the conviction itself, then obviously the person is not proven guilty and then the disqualification ends. The person can continue to be a member of the legislature. Right? So this was very logical. If the stay is on sentence, still the person is convicted, so disqualification can continue. But if the stay is on conviction, then person is not proven guilty and hence his disqualification will end and he will continue as a member of the legislature. Now there are other disqualifications under 1951 RPA also, and we will have an overview of these disqualifications too. These disqualifications are outside the ambit of Section 8. For example, Section 9 deals with the disqualification for dismissal for corruption or disloyalty to state. In this particular scenario, the disqualification period is for 5 years from the date of such dismissal. Section 9A deals with the disqualification for government contracts. Section 10 deals with the disqualification for the office under government company. According to this, a person shall be disqualified if he is a managing agent, manager or secretary of any company or corporation. Section 10A deals with the disqualification for failure to lodge the account of the election expenses. So now this power is with the Election Commission, which says that if the Election Commission is satisfied that a person has failed to lodge an account of the election expenses within the stipulated time period or has no good reasons or justification for the failure, then Election Commission, now this is important, the power resides with the Election Commission. Election Commission shall, by the order published in Official Gazette, declare him to be disqualified. Now if you remember that in Section 11 we discussed that Election Commission has the power to reduce or remove the disqualification. Similarly, in Section 10A, Election Commission has power to declare any member to be disqualified. So Election Commission has both the powers to make any person disqualified or to remove or reduce the disqualification period for that very member. So by now you must have guessed that these provisions are so complex that there should be a distinction between conviction and sentencing. Then if there is sentencing, then there is a distinction that whether that sentence is purely a fine or whether that sentence is in a form of imprisonment. So on the basis of all these things, the disqualification period varies. That is why the 2020 question was in this regard, that there is a need for simplification of the procedure for disqualification of persons found guilty of the corrupt practices under RPA 1951. This topic has appeared at page number 5 and is in relation to the Jim Corbett National Park. The context of wherein this news article is that recently Forest Survey Institute has accused the Uttarakhand Forest Department for certain wrongdoings as far as the maintenance of the forest trees were concerned. However, from the examination's perspective, we need to be aware about certain key facts related to this Jim Corbett National Park. First, as most of you must be knowing, that it is located in the Himalayan foothills near the hill station of Nainital. The Corbett National Park is spread over the area of 520 square kilometers and is a part of Corbett Tiger Reserve. Also from the Biosphere Reserve topic, we know that national parks are always the core area in the Biosphere Reserves. Now along with this particular Jim Corbett National Park, there is also one wildlife sanctuary in the neighborhood, which is the Sona Nadi Wildlife Sanctuary. And Jim Corbett National Park plus Sona Nadi Wildlife Sanctuary, they together make the critical tiger habitat of the Corbett Tiger Reserve. This also has certain historical significance as far as the government policies are concerned, because this was the place from where in 1973 the Project Tiger was launched. This is also the place which boasts a single largest tiger population in a tiger reserve. And according to the report released by Union Environment Department, the Corbett Tiger Reserve has highest tiger numbers with 252. Now, despite the fact that this particular area was declared as a protected area for the Bengal tiger, but it encompasses other important species also. For example, langurs, sloth bears, Asiatic black bears, Indian grey mongoose, jungle cats, elephants, wild boars, spotted deers, Indian antelopes, etc. Geographically, a river Ramganga, which is the left bank tributary of river Ganga, flows through this particular park. As far as the natural vegetation is concerned, the forest includes certain species of sal, teak, oak, silver fir, spruce, and bamboo. So, this information is very important. That is the river Ramganga, which flows through this particular national park. So, that's all for today. All the very best and study hard.